Welcome back. This is a follow-up video to the engine performance category. About 2 hours ago, Uncle Tony's Garage released his diagnostics for the 3-team build done on Engine Power broadcast. So I'm not calling out Uncle Tony or Doctor, whatever the hell his name is being wrong. It could be completely correct. Obviously, putting in a pipe plug driven into the block to block off a feeding oil galley to a portion of the engine could have easily caused catastrophic failure. Running bearings dry, that would exclaim or explain why the engine ate up bearing material. But one of the things that we noticed between the first dyno session and the follow-up run time is the oil pressure. So if their theory is true, with the plug being driven into the front of the block, blocking off basically the whole driver's side and main saddles within the crankshaft and connecting rods, why would it read such a high oil pressure, above 70 psi, and then immediately lose it? If oil is not actually being pumped through the system. Now, the oil galleys for the passenger side lifters is the main portion of where the oil goes. But the rear cam bearing also sees the other 50% of the oil pressure. And the oil pressure gauge is connected to that system. It is directly above the camshaft. So again, the rear of the block, it's distributed, oil pressure distributed between the cam bearing and also the main bearing. But when you have a 40 psi loss in oil pressure, that's not just from one single source of the front of the engine. Because if that passageway is being blocked off, it's just starving oil to the rest of the engine. It should always register very high oil pressure because the oil pressure gauge is not behind those mechanisms. It's in front of it. So I believe they might be onto something, but I believe in the engine performance broadcast, the engine failure is actually going to have to do with the rear of the engine. I believe that the plug, the frost plug that is installed in a small block Chrysler directly behind the camshaft with 72 psi of pressure was well more than enough pressure to back that plug right out and pop it out. That would cause an immediate 40 pounds of oil pressure loss. The remaining 40 pounds of oil pressure being registered by the gauge during the runtime afterwards is coming from the back pressure caused by the plug. But it's not the total reason. So again, Dr. Art, Uncle Tony's Garage, this isn't about piggybacking upon your diagnostics. It is something that I did a video on at the beginning of the month. Basically 1 hour, Engine Performance released their findings. So again, we can diagnose it as a performance industry to what exactly happened. We won't know until Engine Performance or Engine Power releases the actual diagnostics as they are tearing the engine apart. They're obviously going to find bearing material and bearings that are destroyed. The exact reason why they either ran dry could be because of the front pipe plugs driven into the block, or it could be that the oil pressure was lost to where no oil flow was actually going through the engine. Some of the engines can be lubricated without oil. Just the initial assembly lube would be enough to carry it through the first dyno session. The oil being poured into the lifter valley prior to the final assembly with the intake and all that could be enough to supply the hydraulic roller lifters with enough oil to function for the first dyno. But it's the severe oil pressure drop that points that it's not just to the front plug. I believe the rear frost plug backed out because of the excessive oil pressure on the initial startup. 70 psi dropping down to 40. Now again, where is the actual oil pressure reading coming from? Is it after the plug at the front of the block, or is it directly at the rear of the engine feeding and reading the oil pressure behind the camshaft. And we all know that small block Chryslers, the rear cam journal, when it is installed, it actually has a hole drilled through the rear of the cam to relieve the oil pressure that's occurring between the cam and that rear plug. It should be a consistent reading. When you have a massive drop in oil pressure, something else has exited. And I believe in this case it's going to be that rear cam frost plug. That's why performance engine builders use tap plugs in place of the traditional pressed in frost plugs or block plugs. Same thing goes for the exterior block plugs for the coolant passages. Thread them. There is no better insurance to just have something threaded and sealed, knowing that it's not just going to pop out from pressure, because that comes down to the science of hydraulic engineering. 70 pounds is more than enough to pop out a frost plug. Just like a coolant frost plug on the side of the block can pop out with one winter experience of the coolant freezing and expanding. The pressure from the ice will achieve more than 100 pounds per square inch and pop your frost plugs right back out. You're not going to get that with threaded plugs. The block will actually crack before the plugs come out. Add that to your investigation, Uncle Tony's Garage.